There is a rhythm to the way a confident woman moves through the world, a rhythm like the tide, sure of its own power, unafraid of the shore. She doesn't beg the moon to pull her, she rises on her. And when it comes to men, she knows something sacred. There are things she will never do, not for love, not for attention, not for the empty promise of being chosen. She will not fold herself into smaller shapes to fit the pockets of someone else's pride. She will not laugh when her spirit says weep, or bite her tongue when her truth demands to roar. Oh no, she understands. The moment she trades her dignity for affection, she has lost herself in the bargain. A confident woman knows her name isn't written in pencil for others to erase. She plants her feet deep in the soil of self-respect and lets no storm shake her roots. She doesn't chase. She doesn't beg. She doesn't linger where she is half loved or barely seen. And if you ever wonder how she walks with such thunder in her hips, such light in her gaze, it's because she's decided some things are beneath her, and that, my dear, is how she stays. Now let us talk about what those things are. Confident woman walks into a room and owns it. Not because she's loud, not because she demands attention, but because she refuses to apologize for the space she occupies. She understands something fundamental. Her voice was given to her for a reason. Her thoughts, her laughter, her opinions, they are not accidents. Their gifts are meant to be opened, to be shared, to be celebrated. She does not fold herself into the background like a shadow, afraid to be. She does not bite back her words because someone might find them are too much. Too much for who? Too much for what? Too much for the small-minded who can't handle the fullness of a woman who knows her power. No, she speaks. She laughs from her belly. She takes up room, not arrogantly, but unapologetically, because she knows the world will try to convince her she should be quieter, smaller, less. She refuses, she wins. A woman who does not apologize for existing is a revolution in human form. She disrupts the lie that says women should be decorative, agreeable, easy to ignore. She stands firm in her truth, even when it shakes the table, even when it makes others uneasy. Because here's the secret. Discomfort is not a sign that she's doing something wrong. It's a sign that she's doing something right. Growth is never comfortable. Truth is never convenient. And a woman who owns her presence, she reminds everyone around her that too have permission to wrong. She doesn't whisper her ideas in meetings, hoping someone will repeat them louder so they'll be heard. She doesn't soften her edges to make others feel secure in their dullness. She doesn't laugh at jokes that aren't funny just to keep the peace. No, she sets the standard, she speaks clearly. She stands tall, and if someone mistakes her confidence for arrogance, that's their problem, not hers. Because the truth is, the world has always tried to silence women. It has called us too emotional when we care deeply, too aggressive when we lead boldly, too ambitious when we dream big. But a confident woman, she hears those words and smiles because she knows they are not insults. They are proof that she is dangerous to the systems that rely on her silence. So she keeps speaking, she keeps shining, she keeps showing up fully and unapologetically herself. Not to intimidate, but to inspire. Not to dominate, but to demonstrate what's possible when a woman refuses to shrink. And then here's the miracle. When one woman stops apologizing for existing, she gives others permission to do the same. She becomes a mirror, reflecting back the strength they forgot they had. She becomes a torch, lighting the way for those still finding their voice. She becomes living proof that you don't have to be you. That's the power of a woman who takes up space, and that's a power no one can ever take away. A confident woman knows her value is not a bargaining chip. It is not something she lays on the table, hoping a man will pick it up and say, yes, this is enough. No, darling. She carries her worth like a crown. Not because it makes her better than anyone else, but because she understands that no one can give her what she refuses to give herself first. She does not shrink. She does not apologize for taking up space. She does not twist herself into softer shapes, quieter tones, smaller dreams just to make a man feel bigger. Because here's the truth. A man who needs you to be small so he can stand tall was never tall to begin with. A man who demands your silence so his voice can boom is hiding the hollowness inside him. And a woman who knows her strength, she walks away from those games. Self-respect is her armor. It is the voice in her ear that whispers, you do not negotiate your soul. It is the fire in her chest that says if he cannot handle you at your full height, then he does not deserve you at all. She does not beg for love. She does not chase after crumbs of attention, hoping one day he will offer her the whole meal. No, she feasts on her own dignity. She drinks from the well of her own approval. And if a man wants to join her at the table, he must bring his own cup full and overflowing. A woman who respects herself does not wait for permission to shine. She does not ask, do you like me? Before she decides to like herself. She does not measure her beauty by the flicker in his eyes or her intelligence by the nods of his head. She knows. Deep in her bones, she knows. And that knowing is what keeps her standing when the world tries to convince her to kneel. There is a kind of magic in a woman who refuses to bargain with her worth. It shakes the earth. It makes weak men nervous and strong men lean in closer. Because she is not playing the game. She has rewritten the rules. She is not waiting to be chosen. She is doing the choosing. And if a man cannot match the respect she has for herself, the door is right there. She will not beg him to stay. She will not dull her light to keep him comfortable. She will not cut pieces off herself to fit into the box of his expectations. Self-respect is not arrogance. It is not pride. It is survival. It is the unshakable truth that says, I am worthy, not because you say so, but because I do. And once a woman truly believes that, no man can take it from her. No silence can shrink her. No rejection can break her. Because she has built her house on solid ground. And when the winds come, and they will come, she will still be standing. That is the power of a woman who knows her worth. And that, my love, is where true confidence begins. A confident woman builds fences around her soul, not to keep people out, but to show them where the garden begins. She knows that love without boundaries is like water without banks. It floods, it drowns, it destroys what it was meant to nourish. So she plants her signs clearly. Here is where you may walk. Here is where you must stop. Not with anger, not with fear, but with the quiet strength of a woman who understands her own worth. She does not negotiate her no's into maybes. She does not soften her enough into just a little more. When she says this far, she means it. Not because she is cruel, but because she is wise. She has learned the hard way that people will take whatever you allow, your time, your energy, your peace, and still come back thirsty for more. So she tends to her own soil first. She guards her heart like the sacred ground it is. And if someone mistakes her boundaries for walls, let them. Better a wall than a wound that never heals. A woman with boundaries is not cold. She is not rigid. She is alive with the kind of love that knows its own dimensions. She loves deeply, but not at the expense of. She gives generously, but never from an empty well. She understands that the most precious thing she owns is her peace, and she protects it like the treasure is the truth no one tells you. You cannot light yourself on fire to keep others warm. You cannot pour from a cup you keep letting others drain. And when someone tests her lines, she does not crumble, she does not bend, she stands firm, not with anger, but with the calm certainty of a woman who has already decided what she will and will not accept. She knows that every time she holds her boundaries, she teaches people how to love her. Every time she says no to what drains her, she makes room for the yes that will fill her. Some will call her difficult. Some will say she asks for too much. Let them. The right people, the ones who know what love really is, will not see her boundaries as barriers. They will see them as invitations. Here is how to love me well. Here is where my soul blooms. And isn't that the most beautiful gift you can give someone? The map to your heart, drawn in the ink of your own self-respect. A woman who sets boundaries is not building a fortress. She is planting a garden. And in that garden, only what nourishes her is allowed to grow. The rest? She weeds it out, not with hate, but with the kind of love that knows some things must be pulled up by the roots so everything else can live. That is the power of a woman who knows her lines. And that is how she grows not wild, not untamed, but free. A confident woman doesn't wait for a man to tell her she's beautiful. She already knows. She doesn't linger by the phone, begging for scraps of attention, hoping his words will finally confirm what she's been waiting to hear. No, she looks in the mirror and names herself worthy, enough, radiant, not because she's perfect, but because she understands that validation isn't something you collect from others like loose change. It's something you carry within you, like a flame that no wind can put out. She doesn't chase love. She doesn't twist herself into shapes that don't fit, hoping he'll finally see her. She doesn't perform, doesn't beg, doesn't bargain for affection. Because here's the truth. A man who needs to be convinced of your worth was never going to recognize it in the first place. And a woman who knows her value, she doesn't waste time trying to prove it. She lives it. She walks in it. She lets her confidence speak for itself, not in arrogance, but in quiet assurance. You'll never find her fishing for compliments, dropping hints, waiting for someone else to tell her she matters. Why would she? She decides her own worth. She doesn't need a man's approval to feel whole. She doesn't need his attention to feel alive. She is complete, not because she has no flaws, but because she refuses to let her flaws define her. She is enough not because someone finally told her so, but because she stopped asking for permission to believe it. And when love does come, it doesn't fill an empty space inside her. It meets her where she already stands, full, radiant, unshaken. A man who deserves her doesn't give her value. He recognizes it. He doesn't make her queen. He bows before the... Because that's the difference between a woman who chases validation and a woman who owns it. One waits for someone else to tell her she's magic. The other already knows. Some people will call her proud. Some will say she expects too much. Let them. She knows the truth. It's not pride to know your worth. It's not arrogance to refuse to settle. It's wisdom. It's survival. It's the unshakable understanding that you were never meant to be an option. You were meant to be a priority. And if a man can't see that, his loss, not hers. A confident woman doesn't need to be chosen. She does the choosing. She doesn't wait for love to find her. She stands in her power and lets love find its way to her. Because here's the secret. When you stop chasing, you start attracting. When you stop begging, you start receiving. When you stop waiting for someone else to crown you, you realize you've been wearing the crown all along. That's the power of a woman who validates. And that's how she wins. Not by being picked, but by remembering she was never meant to be left on the shelf in the first place. A confident woman understands the power of her voice, but more importantly, she understands the power of her silence. She knows that quietness doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it's the loudest statement she can make. When she chooses not to engage, not to argue, not to waste her breath on what doesn't deserve it, that isn't surrender. That's strategy. That's her standing at the shore, watching the waves crash, knowing she doesn't have to jump into every storm just to prove she isn't afraid. She refuses to let anyone mistake her peace for passivity. Just because she isn't shouting doesn't mean she isn't. Just because she isn't reacting doesn't mean she isn't thinking. Her silence is not empty. It's full of observation, full of wisdom, full of the kind of patience that comes from knowing exactly when to speak and when to let the silence speak for her. She doesn't explain herself to those committed to misunderstanding her. She doesn't waste words on those who only hear what they want to hear. She saves her voice for what matters, for the moments when her words will land like stones, creating ripples that change things. And when she does speak, oh, it shakes the room, not because she's loud, but because she's precise, not because she's angry, but because clear. She doesn't raise her voice to be heard over the noise. She lowers it and makes the world lean in to listen. Because she knows the truth, the most powerful statements aren't screamed. They're whispered with such conviction that they echo long after she's left the room. But here's what sets her apart. She never stays silent out of fear. Never bites her tongue because she's scared of the consequences. Never swallows her truth to keep the peace. If she's quiet, it's because she chooses to be, not because she has to be. There's a difference. A woman who silences herself for comfort is betraying her soul. But a woman who wields her silence like a weapon, she's unstoppable. Some will mistake her restraint for weakness. Some will think her quiet means she has nothing to say. Let them. She knows the power of what she holds back. She understands that sometimes the most revolutionary thing a woman can do is refuse to perform, refuse to explain, refuse to give her energy to what doesn't deserve it. Her silence isn't a void. It's a sanctuary, a place where she gathers her strength, sharpens her thoughts, and waits for the right moment to strike with truth. And when that moment comes, she doesn't hold back. She doesn't soften the blow. She speaks not to hurt, but to heal, not to destroy, but to build. Not to fill the air with noise, but to cut through it with clarity, because that's the mark of a woman who understands her voice. She uses it not because she can, but because she must. That's the power of a woman who owns her silence as much as her speech. And that's how she moves through the world, not in constant noise, but in perfect rhythm, knowing exactly when to let the quiet speak for her. A confident woman refuses to dim her light so others can shine brighter. She knows her mind is not a threat, it's a gift. She won't bite her tongue mid-sentence to seem more approachable, won't pretend confusion over things she understands perfectly, won't laugh awkwardly when a man explains her own expertise back to her. That game, she stopped playing it long ago. Because while the world may still reward women for playing naive, she'd rather be respected than rewarded for wearing a mask. She's witnessed how society winks at women who play dumb, how it calls them cute, how it pats them on the head for making men feel superior. But she'd rather stand tall in her intelligence and risk making someone uncomfortable than shrink herself into a performance of ignorance. What good is being liked if you have to erase yourself to earn it? What value is there in attention that only comes when you pretend to be less than you are? She wants admiration that meets her at eye level, not the condescending praise reserved for women who make themselves small. There's power in a woman who owns her knowledge unapologetically. When she speaks with authority about her field, when she corrects misinformation without flinching, when she refuses to giggle and bat her lashes to soften her expertise, she changes the temperature in the room. Some will shift uncomfortably. Some will call her intimidating, as if that's an insult. But the right people, the ones worth impressing, will lean in closer. They'll recognize what she is. Not a woman trying to dominate, but a woman refusing to apologize for the space her mind deserves. She remembers her younger self, the one who used to downplay her good grades, who pretended not to know answers in class to feign helplessness because boys seemed to like it. That girl breaks her heart now. Because every time she pretended ignorance, she betrayed a piece of her potential. Every time she acted clueless to boost a man's ego, she reinforced the lie that brilliance is masculine while innocence is feminine. No more. Now she speaks her mind with the calm certainty of someone who knows her thoughts have value. Now she stands by her opinions without watering them down. Now she understands. Any man who needs her to play dumb to feel smart wasn't worth her time to begin with. The world will try to convince her that men are intimidated by intelligent women. Let them be. The right man won't be threatened, he'll be thrilled. He won't want a woman who pretends to need saving. He'll want a partner who challenges him to grow. He won't ask her to dim her fire. He'll bring his own flame, because that's the secret. Confidence attracts us. When she stops performing ignorance, she stops attracting men who prefer puppets to partners. So she learns, she grows, she speaks up, not to prove anything, but because silence would be a lie. She asks hard questions. She admits when she doesn't know to seem humble, but because real intelligence means being comfortable with not having all the answers. Most of all, she refuses to let anyone, not society, not insecurity, not some fragile male ego, convince her that curiosity is anything but beautiful, that knowledge is anything but power, that her brilliant, hungry mind is anything but her greatest gift.